Hey everybody, I'm National Master Jesse Cohen, and this is Jeremy Silman's Amateur's Mind, breaking down imbalances in a way that can help you better understand how to make master level plans. Today, we're going to talk about the battle between bishops and knights. I take no credit for this work. This is 100% all of Jeremy's. My goal here is to just relay it in a format that is more interactive. Instead of reading the book, you can listen to me and follow along with the chessboard. Hopefully, that'll be a bit more entertaining. Anyways, so let's get started. The seemingly insignificant difference between bishops and knights is actually one of the most important imbalances on the chessboard. What gives a bishop versus knight battle even more weight is the fact that most players are entirely oblivious to it, thereby handing a student of the imbalances a huge imbalance, or a huge advantage, my bad. I'm going to kind of just skip over and just kind of gloss over the rules regarding bishops and knights, and I just kind of want to jump into the meat of what's going on. So just kind of as a refresher, an imbalance denotes any major difference between white and black's positions, and it is the job of a master to recognize what those imbalances are and to strive to make our imbalances outweigh the other side's imbalances, no matter what that is. So for example, if I have a space advantage and you have the bishop pair, then I need to do whatever I can to make sure that your bishops are as ineffective as possible and that my space advantage is amazing. It's really that simple, okay? So when it comes to minor pieces, these are kind of the rules that he lays out. And I'd also like to preface that this came out before his 4th edition, which he added even more strategies and whatnot. But I really, really like the way this book is laid out. It just makes it very easy to digest. So, rule number 1, bishops and knights are both worth 3 points as far as point count is concerned. It's up to you to manipulate the position to make whatever piece you own more valuable, okay? Rule number 2, bishops are best in open positions where pawns don't block their diagonals. Rules number 3, bishops are very strong in endgames where both sides have passed pawns that are dashing to their respective queening squares. In such situations, the long-range capabilities of a bishop make it far superior to the slow, short-range knight. So in this position, it might be hard to see over here. However, this is just showing us that the bishop is single-handedly stopping all of those white pawns from advancing, but the white king and white knight, which are so far away from black's pawn, can really do nothing to stop its advancement. So black's going to win that game. Rule 4 is that the term bad bishop means that your bishop is situated on the same color as your center pawns, which block it and limit its activity. If you have such a bishop, you want to do one of 3 things. 1, trade it for a piece of equal value. 2, get the pawns off the color of that bishop. Or 3, get the bishop outside that pawn chain so it's not blocking it anymore. Simple, right? Rule 5. A bishop's weakness is that it's stuck on one color the whole game. Anything resting on the other color is safe from its attention. 2 bishops work together very well because they control both color diagonals, thereby negating this one color weakness. Rule 6, knights love close positions with locked pawns. Their ability to jump over other pieces makes them very valuable in such situations. Rule 7, knights usually stand better in the center compared to the edge of the board. I'm just going to make this short. Basically, a knight in the center of the board, like you'll see in this position, will cover, 8 squares. Whereas a knight on the edge of the board, if you just imagine a knight on the edge of the board, would only cover 4 squares. Or if it was in the corner, it would only cover 2 squares, okay? Since knights are not long-range pieces, they need to have secured advanced homes to be effective. These homes are called advanced support points. So basically, I like to think about knights as like really strong dudes with like just, they're small, they're short, they've got stubby arms, like they're really powerful, but unless they're in your face, they're just not effective attackers. So they need to be up close and personal. But if you put them up close to your opponent and they just get kicked back, then what's the point? They actually need to be able to stay there, okay? He also says that knights get stronger logically as they go up the board. A knight that's on the first 2 rows is considered an ineffective piece, not a good one. A knight on the third row is decent. It still has a lot of potential to jump forward, though, and become a decent piece. A knight on the fourth row is finally as good as a bishop. A knight on the fifth row is a strong piece, even stronger than a bishop. But a knight on the sixth row, especially on one of these highlighted squares, is the zenith, the ultimate of what they can achieve. Usually a knight on the sixth row, if you can keep it there, reigns terror on your opponent, and oftentimes a player will sacrifice a rook for the knight and the pawn that guards it. It's that big of a deal. Two more quick rules. Knights are superior to bishops in an endgame if all the pawns are on one side of the board, because the long-range power of the bishop is that it can hit both sides. But if everything's on one side, then the knight doesn't have to jump back and forth. And finally, the first world champion, Wilhelm Steinitz, pioneered work on minor pieces. He stated that the way to beat knights is to deprive them of their advanced support points. And I would even further add, drive them backward into passivity. So, the following position occurred in Silman's own game after the following moves. A Catalan position of sorts. I'm not going to explain everything that led up to this. While you might be interested in that, that's just not the main purpose of this position, okay? So, let's take a look at this. What's going on in this seemingly boring position? The pawn structure is more or less symmetrical. Nobody can lay claim to any space advantage. All the pieces are well defended, and neither king is in any trouble. Aside from the fact that white's pieces are more aggressively posted, since they're trying to take control of d5, black's knights are trying to passively defend against that square. The only major imbalance that exists is a minor piece difference. White has a bishop and a knight, while black is stuck with two knights. Now, I don't like the fact that he says stuck with two knights because, again, if black can make good use of those knights, then that will be what tells the story. Due to the stated imbalance, white will use Steinitz's rule to make the knights ineffective by taking away their advanced support points. He'll do this by restricting the b6 knight by playing pawn to b3 if necessary, kicking it, and then playing the move a4 and a5 to kick it from its perch, driving it backwards to either d7 or c8, which will also increase our control over d5, which this knight would really, really love to get to. We'll probably place our bishop on the flexible square e3 and move our queen to b5, where it'll eyeball the points on e5, which is only defended by the queen, which could be a liability, and the pawn on b7, which could also become a liability after we kick the knight with a5. Together, these might seem small, but together they add up to unpleasant pressure on the black position. So here's what happened. Bishop to e3, rook f to d8, queen to b5, exclamation point. Making each of his pieces better than black's counterparts. White is obviously superior, white's lady is obviously superior to the queen on e7. Notice that this is applying nice pressure, whereas this is merely a defender. This knight on c3 is superior to the black knights because this knight is looking to hop into the outpost, the advanced support point on d5, a square that cannot be guarded by black's pawns ever again, and would be a great square, whereas these knights are purely defending it. This bishop is also superior because it's threatening to chop on b6 whenever it wants to. The only pieces that are actually equal in this position are the rooks. Queen e6, b3. If we didn't notice, black was gaining more control over c4 and looking to hop a knight into c4, so we simply take it away. h6. Maybe trying to prevent bishop to g5, but here, black should be trying as hard as they can to either make the knight superior to the bishop or to get something new going. For example, in this position, all of the kingside pawns are settled on dark squares, and therefore the light squares are potentially weakened. So maybe black could try an idea like h5. This might try to play for h4 and try to get some sort of kingside play going, at least something, instead of just waiting around reacting to white, which is a good way to get yourself killed. In this position, what happened was a4. In the face of a5 threats, driving the knight away and winning on b7 potentially, black played rook takes back, rook to c8, rook to d3, queen to c6, question mark. International master Jack Peters Chess columnist for the Los Angeles Times recommended rook to c7, pawn to a5, knight c8. This holds on to the material for the time being, but black's position still remains quite unpleasant. Queen takes e5, rook to e8, queen d6, knight takes e4. Now black loses by force. Queen takes queen, pawn takes back, a5. Knight takes c3. If black had tried to play knight to d5, it would have lost a pawn after knight takes, pawn takes, and rook takes. And with the impending doom of this pawn on a, with the combination of these pawns pushing, this just would have been a win for white. It might take a while, but it's a win for white. Another option could have been knight to c8, but this would have lost even worse after trading the knights and checking on d8, forking the king and the knight. After knight takes c3, did white robotically just recapture? No. A takes b6, knight d5 saving the knight, and b takes a7, and black resigned. Just for an example, if black were to see this pawn and try stopping it, white would win very nicely with rook takes d5, pawn takes d5, and black is literally helpless against the advancing of b4, b5, b6, b7. There's literally nothing that can be done to stop this, and so black resigned. Now, if that's all there was to this book, I wouldn't be recommending it too much. It's still very useful, but here's where the book, in my opinion, really gains its value. Let's go back. Okay? How would an amateur, and by the way, I'd like to clarify this, an amateur is not an insulting term. Amateur simply means non-professional, or in this case, non-master. So even though there are many strong chess players out there, you're still considered an amateur of some level if you have not obtained at least master level status. How would an amateur handle white's position from diagram 10? Would a student of mine trained to recognize the imbalances that exist in any position, see and make use of them, or would he miss everything and just look at random moves? This question interested me, so I asked some of my students to take the white pieces and do their best to show their stuff. They were told to think out loud, which enabled me to write down their thoughts and see just what, if anything, was wrong with their method of thinking. Of course, I didn't expect my students to play as I did in the Silman Gross game. White's play was rather subtle and is not something that a class player would ordinarily come up with. However, I did hope that they would try to notice the bishop versus knight imbalance and try to make something of it. Instead, I found that my students, with one exception, after noting this imbalance was present, refused to try and turn it into something significant. Why? Does the average tournament player think that a simple bishop versus knight difference is very little to work with? Do they think that such things are unimportant even though I constantly tell them that bishop versus knight is extremely important? Let's see if the following games can shed some light on these questions. So basically what he does at this point is he gives these positions to his students, as he says, and you and I both get to hear what these different students are thinking and what their rating is. So while we're going through this, what I would like you to be doing is thinking, where do your thoughts align with the 1000, with the 1600, with the 1200, and with the master? By seeing where your thoughts lie and your thought patterns compared to what the pattern should be, it should help you identify problems in your own thinking processes and then be able to correct that, right? Let's take a look. 1000. White's king is a bit open, so I prefer black's position. Black's e-pawn is potentially weak, though. The main imbalance is bishop versus knight, and at the moment I have control of a file. I would now like to develop my pieces. I'd like to get a knight to d5, so bishop g5 gives me more control over that square. However, the knight on b6 also controls d5, and I don't know if I really want to give up my dark square bishop. Maybe if I play a3 followed by b4 and bishop b2, this will put new pressure on the e5 pawn. In our next two games, both white players will not question giving up their bishop for the enemy knight. 1000 deserves praise for thinking that the bishop should be retained. Unfortunately, the plan he comes up with is bad because it fails to use Steinitz's rule. take away squares from the knights. Instead, he gives the inactive knight a wonderful post on c4. Also note his fear was so pronounced that he immediately preferred his opponent's position. Amateurs tend to panic in the face of any hint of a kingside threat, and his comments show that he suffers from the same king safety disease. King safety is very important. It is. But only worry if the enemy has some pieces aimed in your king's position, or in your king's direction. If the present position, the only pieces that black has on the king side are his f6 knight and the queen on e7, and this can hardly be construed as a horde of attackers. A little less worry about his king, and a lot more interest in the bishop versus knight battle. In other words, pay attention to those imbalances. Would have served him much better. a3. Though this was move 20 in the Silman Gross game, 1000 was given this position cold turkey, so for him, it was move 1. Rook f d8. I'm not terribly worried about the trade, so I'll keep going with my plan. b4, rook takes d1. I don't want to move my knight backwards, remembering that knights become stronger as they go up the board, not backwards, so my next move was forced. Rook c8. With queen f3, I simultaneously defend both c3 and e4. He hasn't noticed that black is jumping in on the c4 square. A player should always avoid creating holes in his own position. If he had put energy into the bishop versus knight battle, which he clearly didn't do, he would have, in theory, been aware of the potential of the enemy knights. By thinking of other, less important things, he failed to get the most out of his bishop, and he failed to restrain the enemy horses. Queen f3, queen c7. I will guard the knight and free my rook. Something subtle and deadly has occurred. Did you notice it? Poor 1000 has ceased to think of his own ideas and is instead reacting to his opponents. At first, he noted the basic imbalances, and he even came up with a plan. Not a good one, but a plan nonetheless. But he failed to ask what black should try and do, and by failing to pose that important question, he failed to see the weakness of his own ideas. Thus, his plan of placing a bishop on b2 via a3 and b4 led to a hole on c4. Simultaneously, after he followed his plan for a move or two, he suddenly began, not consciously, to bow to the wishes of his opponent. Black makes a threat, white reacts. Black makes another threat, and once again, white reacts. Soon before he knows it, black's ideas come to fruition while white's are nowhere to be seen. Bishop d2, knight c4. I can't let you take on d2. He tried to play the move queen to d3, but I pointed out to him that knight takes d2 would win a piece. So bishop e1. Rook d8. I can play knight b5 and put pressure on his queen. It's dumb though. He's much farther forward than me and I don't like his knight on c4. I can go to c1 and get ready for a fork or a skewer. Unfortunately, that would hang my a3 pawn. I'll play h4 and hope, and for all of my students out there, you know how much I really love when anyone justifies a move with hope. And hope to chase his knight away with g4 and g5, and then the d5 square might become available. Unable to find a solution to his problems on the queen side, he lashes out on the other side of the board. Emotional decisions like this must be avoided, since they usually have very little to do with what's really happening in the position. h4, queen c6. What's he up to? My e4 pawn is well defended. He's protecting f6 again, which means he might be intending to play g6. I can't move my rook because of the a3 pawn, so I'll play for more time. Note how white is coming up with all sorts of esoteric rubbish to explain his opponent's moves. He should be able to figure out their true significance by working out their relationship to the positive imbalances in black's position. Here, black is simply giving more support to the b5 and d5 squares and is also adding further pressure to the point on e4. I'm also giving my queen to go into the useful square e6 in some circumstances. Amateurs often think a good move must involve a direct threat. However, this is way off the mark. A move that tightens some key points while placing pressure on an enemy pawn deserves a lot more respect than white gave it. b5, a one-move attack that simply chases the queen to the good e6 square. I'll get my a pawn to safety by advancing it to a4. a4, rook d4. Guarding his c4 knight. I'll play knight e2 and attack his rook. Knight e2 double question mark, and we stop the game since he hung his pawn on e4. Actually, it's always useful to go over these games. This move is not a blunder because if the move rook takes e4, there is knight to c3 attacking the rook, and after this rook moves, there's queen takes b7. In fact, actually, this is good for white since suddenly now white would have a queenside pawn majority, and the pieces actually make a lot of sense for pushing, targeting a7, and trying to create a passed pawn. So actually, it would not be in black's best interest to take the pawn. But that doesn't matter. What matters is the way he was thinking. I hope that the reader won't think me overly harsh for my comments in this game. I'm not criticizing the man, just the player and his erroneous thinking processes. He does some things extremely well, but if he wants to advance in the rating system, he'll have to accept my literary lashings and iron out these problems, okay? Now, for the sake of time, let's skip ahead. So again, as we're going over this, I really hope that you're thinking to yourself, does any of my thoughts coincide with the 1000s? Do they coincide with the masters? Are they completely different? Do I have any thoughts at all that are anything like this? Whatever it is, be comparing and contrasting and think to yourself, where are you lacking in your thinking? This is a 1600, 600 points, 3 categories above. I'd also like to mention that this is not an online rating. This is a ranked rating. A lot of players confuse this, and a lot of players often get disappointed when they build up a bullet rating or a blitz rating on chess.com or lead chess to some 14. I hear a lot of players, within 3 months, they built up their rating to 1200, 1400, 1600 online, and they think that must be what their rating is. However, again, while these rankings can be compared to actual rankings and do have somewhat of a weight, oftentimes these players are horrifically surprised when they play in a real tournament and realize that it's just not the same at all. Often these ratings are heavily inflated, and all that blitz chess didn't really prepare them for the long haul of a real classical game. Here's what the 1600 has to say about the exact same circumstance. I like one knight d5. If he takes it, I'll get a strong passed pawn. I have to get my bishop into play. So f4 is a possibility, and if he takes, I could go bishop takes f4. However, my king would then be open. I could also play the move queen to b5 and support the d5 square even more, and then play knight d5. I could also pin bishop g5 and control d5 even further. I told him he was not breaking down the position into imbalances. Instead, he was just looking at a bunch of moves. I think that's a little bit harsh. I think that the player's obviously fighting for d5, although he should actually, what Silman is trying to get here is that he didn't even really talk at all about the bishop versus knight imbalance, which is of course, the number one difference between the two positions, okay? You've got to stop yourself from just looking at moves right away. You've got to start looking how to break down these positions and understand what's going on. A master understands that the board will tell us what's going on if we know how to look for it. An amateur just does whatever they want to. Bishop g5. This also connects my rooks and develops my bishop. I like how he didn't actually take, even though he was pointed out that he didn't look at the imbalances, he just kept on with whatever he wanted to do anyway. He never recognized his bishop for knight advantage, so it's not possible for him to try and make use of it. However, he did notice the d5 square, and he's trying everything in his power to grab it. Rook f d8, rook takes d8 check, rook takes d8. Now rook to d1 to trade rooks allows me to continue my fight for the d5 square. Though he hasn't followed the best plan, he's still sticking to a clear idea: domination of d5 or the creation of a passed pawn. With energy and admirable determination, white deserves a lot of credit for the way he's playing. Rook d1, h6, rook takes d8, bishop takes d8. I will now exchange on f6 so I can have even more control over d5. Bishop takes f6, queen takes f6, knight d5. Queen d6. Now I will support my knight and I e8. Queen b5 exclamation point. King f8. Knight takes b6. This gives him doubled pawns. At the moment, His knight is superior to black's, so why should he swap it without getting the pass pawn that he so desperately wanted? One must avoid dumping a plan for baubles lying on the side of the road. Now I will trade queens, since he has doubled pawns and my king is closer to the center. I don't know why he thought his king was closer to the center. It is clear that the opposite is true. Queen d5, blundering move. Queen takes queen, pawn takes, king e7, king f3, f5, trying to keep him out of e4 so he can't go guard it, g4 trying to undermine that, and g6. And white lost the d-pawn by force and lost the game. One more example today. This is a 1200. At first glance, I see that black's queen is undefended. White has a bishop versus knight versus two knights. My bishop has to move to complete development, so that would be one of my first considerations. I also control d5, so I could move my knight to d5, attacking his queen. This would also allow me to occupy both open files. By clearing it, he means he's clearing the c file. If we compare the 1200 to the previous player's 1600, we can see that the 1600 ignored the main imbalance but played purposefully toward a secondary goal, which isn't so bad, while the 1200 saw the main imbalance very clearly but refused to make use of it. Bishop g5. I really like this move. Why did he like it? True, it does pin the knight, but trading the bishop instantly gets rid of your bishop versus knight advantage. Don't like a move just because it appears to be aggressive. Putting the question to my bishop. If I take his knight and play rook ac1, I should be able to grab both open files. I think this is a good idea. After bishop takes f6, he won't want to take with the pawn due to a check on g4. He should have decided on capturing the knight before he played bishop g5. Don't stick your bishops on g5 and b5 and then act surprised if the opponent tickles it with the move a6 or h6. Only play the bishop to these squares if the exchange is good for you or if the opponent can't break the pin. In the present case, black can easily break the pin. Also, the exchange makes black happy because he gets rid of the white bishop versus knight advantage. Take, take. Now I'll advance to d5 and attack the queen. Notice the word attack. He's not too concerned with the state of the position after black captures on d5. Instead, all he cares about is the obvious threat to black's queen, which apparently gives him a sense of odd power. Knight takes d5. Now I'll take with the rook and double up on the open d-file. Notice how he's jumping back and forth between a few ideas. One moment he's trying to control both the c-files and the d-files. The next, he is trying to double on the d-file and dominate that. His thoughts are scattered, and the only reason things work out is because he started with a solid position. Trading a bunch of pieces can't hurt his game. Queen e6. Black is piling up on my rook. Now I can place all three of my pieces on that file. Black intentionally plays a planless passive game, a suicidal act in a real game, of course, so I can see how white will react. Rook a to d1, f6. Now he's lined up his king and queen on the a8 g8 to a2 g8 diagonal, which is alarming. If queen c4, I don't have any threats. How can I get to his king? I could play rook to d6 and chase the queen. This will give me a check on c4 if the queen moves off the diagonal. However, he has queen f7 when the diagonal is still defended. My original plan was to place all the pieces on the file. He could challenge me with rook to d8. While I do this, I'm looking at queen to h5, followed by rook to d6. He can't push the g-pawn. So my queen would be safe there. If queen h5, queen f7, queen takes f7, rook takes f7, I've only created an even exchange, but it does weaken his back rank. White still suffers from three illusions. The first is his desire to get at the black king. Why do amateurs always try for mate? Why not continue to restrict black's pieces and simply leave the opponent helpless? Yes, the win would take time, but a chess player is nothing without patience. The second illusion is White's worry that black will place a piece on d8, because if he does, well, that would just obviously lose a rook. And the final illusion is based on the a2 pawn. White seems to be unaware that if this d5 rook moves, we could just take a free pawn on a2. It seems clear to me that White's confusion is due to a lack of threats in the position. If he can't make a concrete threat, he feels that something must be going wrong. He won't be able to make any real chess advances if he doesn't mend this flaw in his thinking process. Rook a c8. Now he's threatening to bring the rook down to the 7th rank and attack my pawn. So, rook d6, queen f7, queen takes f7, check, rook takes f7. If only I could get his rook off f8 and my rook to d7. We had just discussed double attacks, so I was secretly creating a situation where the possibility for such an attack would occur. Rook d6, queen takes a2. I saw that, but I didn't think he would take it. I guess I thought he had to defend with queen f7. Now I have to worry about the b2 pawn. If I move my rook to d7, then rook takes b2 is met by queen g6, and I mate him. Rook d7. This gives me a double attack on g7 and b7. b6, queen g6 question mark. A quick move usually means a missed opportunity. He missed the winning move, queen to g4, which makes a double attack on g7 and c8. That would mean that after rook f7, there's suddenly rook takes f7, followed by queen takes c8. I'm in a bad endgame, so rook takes f7 is no help since his other rook is into play after rook takes rook, queen takes back, queen takes here, king takes, rook d7 check, king g6, rook takes a7, rook c2. Rook d8 check, rook takes d8, rook takes d8, rook f8. If rook takes f8, king takes f8, then black stands better. I've got a lost endgame, but what else can I do about it? Rook takes f8, double question mark. What a strange move. He just said it was bad and then he does it anyway. I suspect this was due to too much respect for his opponent, or it could have been that he simply gave up due to depression. Natural and obvious and best was to play rook d7 threatening mate, where black would have nothing better than rook f7 and then repeat the position and get a draw, because objectively speaking, if we're worse, a draw would be a good result. So after rook takes f8, king takes f8, I stop the game. Tips. The imbalance of bishop versus knight is of vital importance. If you have a bishop, you must strive to take away all the advanced support points, all advanced posts, from the enemy knight. If you have the knight, you must fight to create a good home for the horse and to create situations where the bishop is not particularly useful. Bishop versus knight does not necessarily favor one piece or the other. You must plant the seeds which allow your piece to prosper. If you don't recognize and use it, you will find that this so-called advantage won't do you any good. You must take your opponent's possibilities into account. And finally, don't ever play a quick, thoughtless move that will usually turn out to be the move that ruins your game. With that, the only reason I was able to do this actually was because I had a cancellation. Right now, these days, I'm just super booked between doing group lessons, private lessons, school programs, chess tournaments. For those who don't know, this is all I do. So it was kind of fortunate that I was able to do this, and I hope that you guys all enjoyed this. Again, I take no credit for this whatsoever. This is all 100% owned by Jeremy Silman, international master, a huge influence on me as a chess player. And I hope that you enjoyed this. I really do. So if you do enjoy it, please make sure to go pick up the book yourself. And while you're at it, please, drop a follow on this channel, or better yet, head on over to my YouTube page and subscribe there so I can keep some good content coming for you. So with that being said, I'm National Master Jesse Cohen. This is Summit School of Chess. Have a great day. Bye for now.